So I've always been very fascinated with the entire startup ecosystem.
What is the difference between general recruitment and the executive search?
People or founders emphasizing on the experience more than the culture fit itself. Right? Number one and foremost is that as a founder's office, you get a bird's eye view on the entire ecosystem. Right? I've got an opportunity to interview a lot of people. I think culture fit is the number one thing that we look at.
Or AI taking interview instead of human?
To understand behavioral part of the person and attitudinal part of the person, I would say the AI is not there right now. Very famously, as Gen Z say that vibe match ho rahi hai ke na hai. So having a very strong brand, employer brand is extremely important in the new age ecosystem.
How it is going to impact specifically on startup or founders building their team?
When we are looking at senior executive roles, these are very coveted roles. And the right talent pool that you'd require for that would be fairly limited as well. Right? The stability is extremely important, right? That's something that I've heard almost all of my clients speak about. It should be more hands-on, less delegation, and when you get at scale, then you start delegating, right? That's when the sweet spot is. Set a process that you're gonna follow, be consistent at it, and one thing is that never lie to yourself. What will not work is what I'll answer is that
So, hello viewers, welcome to a brand new episode of Sign Up Startup powered by Bharat Valley Incubator and Accelerator Private Limited, Launchpad for Innovation. So, today we have an exceptional guest with us who is the game changer in talent acquisition field, and specifically when it comes to hiring leaders for the corporates, leaders for the startups, then he is the man to go. So, please welcome Mr. Rohil Shetty, and from him we will know how he plays a crucial role and how he helps startup founders and corporates to build their team to grow and scale. Okay, Rohil. So, welcome to our podcast. And how are you feeling today?
great. Thanks for having me here, Ashish. I think this is a wonderful setup that you've got over here. I think this is going to really help founders and even like-minded people to understand the space a little better. Very happy to give what I've experienced through my journey as well.
So, just before we start the podcast, so our viewers will definitely like to know about your background and how you have ended up being an executive search.
Of course. So I've always been very fascinated with the entire startup ecosystem and how leadership impacts the future growth of the companies as well, right? I've been very fortunate in the early stage of my career to be part of this primary research company where I got to interact with multiple senior leadership talent and also C-suite executives in that role, right? I was advising them on short-term consulting projects that they were working on for management consulting clients and for private equity and hedge fund clients, right? So that gave me the exposure to the talent ecosystem that's available in the Indian ecosystem, right?
Okay.
Post that, I got to work in a fintech startup myself, right? So I joined in as a director in this M&A tech firm, which was primarily playing in the mid-market M&A deals and micro acquisitions, right?
Okay.
So that allowed me to get in touch with probably hundreds of founders, understand their pain points in the ecosystem,
Yeah.
and also interact with senior executives in the space as well, right? So with that, it was a very natural move for me to move into the executive search space as well. And I think with the current setup as well, it's a new setup for all of us coming in. So super exciting times here.
Okay, so here I want to ask a question that what is the difference between general recruitment what we do and the executive search?
Right. So when we look at general recruitment, it's usually for filling up seats, right? Quickly. We see a lot of that happening in our IT space, etc. Right. When it comes to executive search, is much more and beyond the recruitment part of it, right? While the backbone of it is talent acquisition, but what goes on is a search itself, right? So we work and partner with large conglomerates. We work and partner with top startups, or I would say growth stage startups, to help them with the leadership talent, right? most of the leadership talent that is sitting in the Indian ecosystem that would be a great fit for these founders from a culture point of view are passively looking out, right? Probably they're not available in the market.
Okay.
So as an exec search player, the deep connections that we have, the availability of resources that we have really helps any client that we work with. And of course, with the search methodology, it helps them get a very comprehensive understanding about the talent ecosystem that's available in the space. And apart from their own industries, what are the other adjacent industries they can look at, right? That's where a search player comes in to help them with the entire process and working more as a consultant than a recruiter.
Okay, okay. So super. So now we will move to the first segment of our podcast, that is Fab 5 segment. So before you came to our show, we have asked our community that what all questions they wanted to ask to you specifically, and out of the all the questions, we have figured out 5 top questions, and these will be I will ask one by one. Okay. So the first question is, what are some common mistakes startups make when hiring key executives, and how can they avoid them?
Amazing. I think very interesting. I think as a consultant, this is a very important thing that we come in doing as well, right? In an executive search world, walking the founders, walking the companies through the entire process, right? I would say that number one, I would say obviously there are multiple reasons that would come into play, but the top ones would be number one would be people or founders emphasizing on the experience more than the culture fit itself, right? I think that's a very important point to play. I think when we see startups, it's a long term vision. It's we the founders need to align with the key candidates, how their fitments are gonna work in the future as well, right? So a culture fit, how their attitude is, I think how is very important in this ecosystem particularly. I would say second would be rushing through the process, right? A lot of founders I see are trying to fill in seats, right? Rather than filling seats, I think they should be looking at how are they filling up the positions with the right person in the right place, right?
Yeah.
With the right talent coming in, right? So that would be there. So, third would be not giving a very good understanding or a very comprehensive understanding about the roles and responsibility, right?
Okay.
While we do understand in the early stage startup ecosystem, most of the roles would be a generalist role. But in a more growth stage setup and obviously in setup companies, there should be defined roles and a very clear career path given to coming in, which really helps any candidate to have that kind of trust before joining the firm as well.
Okay, so we'll go to the next question, that is, in your experience, what role does the founder's office play in building a robust talent pipeline?
Right. Very interesting, right? Me, myself, being in the founder's office in my previous role, working as a generalist in the role, I think I can add a few points here, right? I think number one and foremost is that as a founder's office, either as a chief of staff or as an associate or analyst, however you want to place it, um, you get a bird's eye view on the entire ecosystem, right? All the different functions that are there, right? Right from your tech, business operations, sales, marketing, IT, etc. Right?
Okay.
And you also often get a chance to work with all the co-founders in the ecosystem. Right?
Yeah.
So this gives you a very robust understanding about what the culture looks like at a larger level for the company.
Yeah.
You yourself in some way are defining the culture as well, right? So as as um as a journalist yourself, you're able to see the kind of talent that would be required to flourish in the role, right? I think that's a very important way that a journalist or a founder's office person can see how they can develop a great talent pipeline for the company, right? I think in my previous roles, I've got an opportunity to interview a lot of people over time for associate and chief of staff roles within our organizations and also from my clients as well, right? I think culture fit is the number one thing that we look at, right?
Okay.
I think as famously as Howard Schultz has mentioned, who's the ex CEO of Starbucks, right? You interviewing is an art. It's not a science, and it's almost impossible to understand if a person is gonna be a culture fit.
Right.
Looking at their CVs, right? So again, emphasizing my point again, right? So in my previous answer, you should focus a lot more on the behavioral aspects and the attitudinal aspects of the person rather than the experience or the technical aspects of the person as well.
Like you mentioned that interviewing is an art and not science. So how you look AI playing a role or AI taking interview instead of human? Do you think that is going to be happen in next decade?
Already see that happening, right? I think there were a couple of Shark Tank companies also that had come that helps with that kind of setup, right? So I think those would be more relevant to very specific technical aspects or technical roles, right?
Okay.
Where there's a lot of check boxes that need to be done.
Yeah.
कि ये बंदे को ये आता है, check, नहीं आता, check, not a check, right? So in those aspects, of course, this could be a good way. But to understand behavioral part of the person and attitudinal part of the person, I would say the AI is not there right now that could give you the answers, right? That human
Okay.
touch is required.
Yeah.
As you say, the psyche matches or not. I think very famously, as Gen Z say that vibe match ho rahi hai ki na, right? So I think putting that as putting those points aside, I think a founder needs to really invest in the interview process, right? How well the candidate is coming across from all the behavioral questions, right? His conflict resolution, his team management skills, his leadership aspirations, etc. I think those are only possible when you do things in person or on video by the founder itself. I don't see AI taking over that.
Okay. So we'll come to the next question, that is, what advice would you give to startup founders looking to attract top executive talent, especially when they can't match the salaries of larger firms?
Right. Fortunately, I've not got any clientele that was in the segment, but myself being part of the early ecosystem in the startup world, I face this challenge, right? Uh, Compensation is a very big part of anyone taking up an assignment. But what I've seen, at least in the new age ecosystem, in with the new candidates coming in,
Hmm.
they focus a lot more on how impactful the role is going to be, right?
Okay.
So that impact element is very important. So that's when the founder's vision, the founder's way of communication comes into play, right?
Okay.
How are they able to portray the larger vision of the company, what their 3 to 5 year action plan is going to look like, right?
Hmm.
So when you're able to portray this really well, and this really helps the employee or the future employee to trust this ecosystem, to join hands with the founders for a larger play, right? I think that would be the number one play in this. Yeah.
So our next question is, how do you help startups navigate the challenge of hiring executives who are not only talented but also aligned with the founder's vision?
Right. Very important point, as I previously mentioned in my previous point. I think having that kind of employer branding is extremely important, right? You see companies like Cred, Zomato, Swiggy attracting the right talent, and it's a very aspirational brand itself, right? While they have been very early in the ecosystem, but everyone aspires to be in those companies. So having a very strong brand, employer brand, is extremely important in the new age ecosystem.
Okay.
Second would be, I think, how well are you compensating on the other aspects, the non-monetary aspects, right? It could come through a very attractive ESOP setup, right? It could come with a very interesting play on the work environment itself, right?
Hmm.
How autonomous is it, etc., right? And the third and the foremost would be, again, right, how well is your team and your future employee, you're able to convince them on the larger vision of things, right? On the So that is extremely important in this scenario. Yeah.
So do you think that flexibility of doing like this work from home or the hybrid
Yep.
culture which is coming, how it is going to impact specifically on startup or founders building their team? Do you think they should give all this flexibility?
Um, I would say yes, because you are able to attract talent not only across city but across globes through this environment, right? So the flexible environment, right? I'll give you an example myself. In my previous role, we had people who were leading products for us sitting out of other cities altogether, right? And we used to do a in-person meet every month. so that that kind of a culture fit, us extending that kind of the in-person things that we need to give is available for these guys also, and they get all these benefits of learning from peers. That's I think if there's a balance between both of them, I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Okay. So the last question of our segment is, in your experience, what are the most common hiring challenges that startups face when trying to fill senior roles?
Right. I think number one and foremost is that the limited availability of uh, profiles or the candidates itself, right? When we are looking at senior executive roles, these are very coveted roles, right?
Mm.
And the right talent pool that you'd require for that would be fairly limited as well, right? Uh, I think Dipender Goyal had recently also said in one of his interviews that the kind of people they want to have on their team are not looking out for jobs,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Uh, they kind of reach out, make sure, or through a exec search player or through a search partner or themselves, reaching out to the right talent with a very compelling offer from their side. When I say offer, not from a monetary point of view, from a business growth or a what the new role is gonna entail, right? So that's what they offer, right? So that's extremely important. So that's where a search partner also really helps you, right? Because we would come with that kind of a network in that industry, particularly, and the know-hows would of the industry as well, right? Of who would be probably looking out, who would not be, what kind of talent is available in the market, what kind of talent would be available outside the market
Yeah.
that would be adjacent to the space itself, right? So that would be the number one thing. The other thing that I would that someone challenges on is that the founders are not able to compel a very good growth story, right? They're not able to give a very clear understanding about how the role would entail in the near future, right?
Okay.
Because most of the roles in this in early stage ecosystem at least are generalist roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to generalist roles, you need to have a specialization after a few years down the line here, right?
Yeah.
You famously see chief of staffs of various large companies ending up leading categories or
Yeah.
leading one of the other product lines altogether, right? So giving a very compelling growth story and how their progression is going to look like in the ecosystem is extremely important over here. And third would be, I would say, them coming up with understanding of the market in terms of what are the other non-monetary aspects that someone can provide with that. Exactly as you mentioned previously, right? Is there flexibility in terms of the work from home or the hybrid setup, etc., right? How are they going about that? How is the non-monetary aspects on the longer play on ESOPs gonna be working with these guys, right? So I think these are very important factors that would help you attract the right talent in the space then.
So that is it. So now we will start with our next segment, that is basically elevator pitch segment, but we will not do the elevator pitch today. As you are here, you have a rich experience in executive search. So two things I will ask. First is, if someone wants to reach to you, how they can reach. And second thing, when you are looking for candidates, when you are searching, through LinkedIn or through any other portal or through person connections, what all key things or 1, 2, 3 points which you see while finalizing the candidates?
Makes sense. Great. I think how can someone reach an exact search player? I think the best medium would be through LinkedIn. I think it's a great interacting medium. It's a great networking medium for professionals. I think that's the number one way.
Okay.
I think usually what happens in the exact search business is that we usually don't rely on just CVs.
Hmm.
I have never represented a candidate without having an in-person meeting or a
Okay.
video chat with the person, right?
Okay.
So that's we would be definitely having a quick chat together before I even represent your profile anywhere over there. Right? So I think that would be the best medium to go about it. What are the things that goes on beyond search, right? So it's more of a top-down approach, right? We do map out the entire industry segments that someone would look at, the kind of functions you would require in that segment. Then you look at the target companies that you would want to look at from, right?
Okay.
And then narrow down on the people, right? So you get a very holistic understanding of each company's hierarchy, which person would play what kind of roles, what kind of designations would make sense for us to get from and for the next role itself, right? Because even the titles are very different in different company, right? Somewhere it's an SVP, somewhere it's a director, right?
Yeah.
So it's all so we have to be fungible that way, right? So finding the right person is more a top down approach. Then the other parameters, I know non. I'm keeping aside the skill sets over here because by default the skill sets need to be a match in terms of the technical aspects or what the person has done in the past exactly. The stability is extremely important, right? That's something that I've heard almost all of my clients speak about. I think very common in the ecosystem now to see everyone jumping ships in a 2 year or 1 year time frame. We see people who have stuck around because the idea is that they have done something for a longer term with a longer term impact vision, right? So that's what we want our clients to have as well, right? Anyone coming in a 3 to 5 year horizon plan of what the exact actionable things are gonna be. So that's something, the main core things that we will be looking for in any strong candidates that we will be looking at for a leadership hire.
So now let's start with the funniest segment of our podcast, that is facts versus myths. Great. Where normally I will say a statement and you have to mention whether it is a fact or myth and you have to explain them.
Okay,
So are you ready?
done. Let's go.
So, so the first statement is the best executives for startups are those with big corporate backgrounds because they bring stability and experience.
Huh. At an absolute level, I would say a myth, but it goes both ways, right? I have seen executives from top companies with stable careers excel in the startup environment. And the other side of the thing is that the startups need a very different kind of attitude, right? You need very hands-on approach altogether. And of course, there are a lot of turmoil that happens to the startup journey as well, right? Most of the corporate environment setups, you have very well set up processes, etc. वो यहाँ पर नहीं होते, right? I'm talking about the early stage ecosystem, right? Me myself being in the operator landscape, कुछ भी नहीं था, right? You are the IT yourself, you are the HR yourself, you are the admin yourself, you are the coffee giver yourself, right? You do all the different roles. What will not work is what I'll answer is that someone who doesn't want to get their hands dirty and wants to only delegate, right? That does not work. It should be more hands-on, less delegation, and when you get at scale, then you start delegating, right? That's when the sweet spot is.
Okay. Second statement is it's better for startups to handle recruitment internally rather than working with an executive search firm like you.
Very biased answer, but I would say a myth. While you're having a robust talent ecosystem internally has its own benefits, but what an external search partner brings is the leverage that you have in terms of the access to the talent. Number one, the extensive network.
Okay.
Number two is the unbiased opinion that we come in as a consultant, right? We don't have, yeah, I think that will be the two most important points, yeah.
Third statement is chief of staff and executive assistant are same.
Huh. Uh, for sure a myth, right? I think while both of them have really important roles working very closely to the founders or the CEO, but both of them are very different paths, right? I would say the executive assistant plays a role working very closely with the CEO on the administrative side of things, right? Helping with the entire setup, right? While the chief of staff works on more strategic things in nature, right? Which would probably also be revenue facing, right? So it's a very different kind of setup. But I've seen very recently a lot of posts where the title is chief of staff, but surprisingly, most of the roles and responsibilities are actually administrative in nature. And I've seen this fire going on LinkedIn currently, where people are like calling out these roles, etc., to be called executive assistant rather than chief of staff. It's a very common thing that's happening as well. Yeah.
In your early stage, you should join a startup for a better career growth opportunity.
Agree. I would agree for sure. I think anyone obviously it depends on a lot of factors, right? You coming in as a young individual in the ecosystem, if you have things to look after from a family and a financial perspective, maybe you have to take choices accordingly. But I would always advise anyone to be in a generous role in the start. Learn, get your hands dirty, stick to work with founders with great vision, and if you get an opportunity, stick by them, right? So you get that kind of exponential growth that could happen, which could not happen probably in a corporate setup if you would go through the corporate ladder itself.
Okay. The last one is work-life balance is a new normal for Gen Zs.
I would say it's the truth, right? I think it's extremely important to have a work-life balance, but that comes. It's a very, I would say, a controversial way of seeing it, and it's a very. Everyone has their own opinion on it, right?
Yeah.
My opinion on it is that this you don't need to have a work life balance if you're really passionate about what you're building, right?
Yeah.
It could all be one, right? That's number one. But I think on the other side, I think with the mental well-being required for any individual, I think that's another way to see at it. Yeah.
Okay. So that is the end of our facts versus myths segment. And now we have reached to the last segment, that is secret to success. So in this segment, we will try to know what is your secret to success, what all, the techniques or what all are the qualities which you follow, us, anything, something rituals will you follow,
Yeah.
to be successful, if you can share with our audience.
Huh. I think famously, this is one quote that's always stuck with me. I don't know. So, I'm not someone who actually remembers a lot of the books that I've read or any of the quotes that I've read, but this is actually very deeply enrooted in me in some way. Is that you tell yourself you can do it, or you can tell yourself you cannot do it. Either way, you're correct. This was a statement by Henry Ford very early in my career. That's when I read it. Uh, what it says is that it's completely based on your philosophy and about getting things done, right?
Correct.
I think that's number one there. I would say there are a lot of new age words like hustle and jugaad, etc. But the idea is being consistent. That's it.
Okay.
Set a process that you're gonna follow, be consistent at it. And one thing is that never lie to yourself, right? If you promise something else to yourself, make sure that you go by it. It could be going out for dinner with your family to getting some work done. If you have promised yourself you're gonna do that, make sure you do it. I think that's the only two things that I stick by it, plain and simple, and it really works for me.
Okay, so that is, we have come to the end of our segment and end of our podcast, where basically, if I want to conclude it, then it's like how executive search firms, helping founders and the big corporates finding the right talent who are, aligned with the visions and aligned with the goals, and specifically for executive part, that what all they should focus. Like one of the point you mentioned, that there should be stability. Recent times, we are having witnessed this culture of, meme culture, where you have to switch, otherwise you will not get increment. But that is at some point of time, those things are, I believe that that is a kind of false narratives which is going. We know, maybe you take Mukesh Ambani or Mr. Adani, they have someone who is there with them from last 30 years,
Yeah.
35 years. So yes, loyalty matters, stability matters, and specifically if you are a startup, if you are in a growing stage startup, so how it is very important to develop a strong team, and for that you definitely need good people, right people. And if you're not able to find those kind of talent, then definitely they should come to a consultant. They should not see as a cost, rather they should see as an investment, which will obviously add to their top line.
100%.
So thanks for being in our show.
Thanks, Ashish. Thanks for having me here. Wonderful chatting here. Look forward to engaging with you in the future as well.
Yeah. So, viewers, this is it for today. We will come with a new guest in our next episode. Till then, stay tuned.